Thought I would make this wrap-up video of the major driving days and thoughts and memories along the way. Some have asked is, why did you do it? Well, I've been planning to go to Mexico for quite a while and tour. I've been to South America, Central America, and somehow skipped over my next door neighbor to the south. And somebody asked me, says, well, have you seen everywhere there is to see in the United States? And I thought, no, but there's a lot of places in the Rockies I'd like to visit, so I plan to do that. I had 2 appointments when I left early that morning. One was to have lunch with my buddy in Hobbs, New Mexico, and then that would be lunch July 3rd, and then July 4th get there to Lava Hot Springs to watch the fireworks with my daughter and her family. That's the only 2 appointments I had, and I wasn't really sure what all I was going to be doing. But when I got to Santa Fe, I posted on Facebook that I'd arrived in Santa Fe, and my daughter saw it and says, "Hey Dad, are you going to see the miraculous staircase?" And I went, "Oh shoot, I forgot all about that's here. That'll be first thing in the morning." So I went to Loretta Chapel and fulfilled something I'd wanted to do for years and got to tour the Loretta Chapel where the miraculous staircase is built. That has quite an interesting legend of history about it. Leaving Loretta Chapel in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I headed northbound up through the center of Colorado with the destination going to be Leadville, Colorado. I've never seen so many RVs in my life. But then again, it was July 4th weekend, and that of her mother and his brother was clogging the roads. And RVs, I got a new passion for really not liking them unless they can do 50 miles an hour up a 40% grade. But anyway, that aside, I got to Leadville. There were so many people in that town, you couldn't stir them with a stick. I realized that I did not have an address or phone number, and I could not remember where my buddy lived because it had been just too many years. So I headed on up toward I-70, and again, staying off the interstate, staying between the mountains. I-70 was closed down because of mudslides, so all the traffic, east and west traffic, was being diverted to the side roads, and that meant what was going to be a peaceful road that I was going to travel was now clogged with traffic from I-70. It was dark 30 when I arrived in Craig, Colorado, found the last room in the last motel on the highway. While I was in the lobby, just checked in, other people came in and they were hopping mad that there wasn't a room available, and they had looked at about 15 different places. Anyway, laid my head on the pillow and waited for morning, which came about in about a millisecond. Heading westbound this morning, July the 4th, with the destination of Lava Hot Springs, Idaho, with an estimated time of arrival about sunset and time to watch the fireworks with my daughter and her family. But first stop is Dinosaur National Quarry. Now that turned out to be a wild goose chase. On the map it said Dinosaur National Monument. Okay. I went on a 25-mile gravel road goose chase through this Dinosaur National Monument, which really should be named Dinosaur National Park, because there's another place 25 miles back down the road called Dinosaur National Monument Quarry. Well, I thought that was a quarry. They're mining something. I wanted to look at dinosaur bones, so when I got down to the end of this 25-mile goose chase, I found the park ranger and I says, "Where's the bones at?" He just laughed, says, "Oh, we get 2 or 3 people a week down here asking for the bones, as they're 25 miles back in town." Okay, well, the map said it's going to be 52-minute drive. I got there in 30. I put the hammer down. I flattened the hills, I straightened the curves. Anyway, that was awesome once I got to see the bones. Then I went on up to Flaming Gorge, just totally beautiful, beautiful area. And in that area, met another YouTuber and became friends. Then let's see, now we're into Wyoming, we're crossing over into Idaho, and finally in the late afternoon arrive at Lava Hot Springs. I did make it to Lava Hot Springs in time to watch the fireworks. Spent a few days there with my daughter and her family, went over to Soda Springs, and looked at the geyser over there and took a couple of day trips. One of the really nice things we did was we went over to Pocatello, Idaho, to this really nice restaurant. I can't remember the name of it right now. I'll tag it. Anyway, after a few days, it was time to move on and keep the journey going, keep up the adventure. I headed out to go over to Shoshone Falls, which I'd heard many people talk about and highly recommended. Well, going down the freeway, I see American Falls. Well, I'm into all things waterfalls, so I pulled off and made a stop at American Falls. Continuing on down the freeway, westbound, I came to Hanson Bridge. Now, I had heard about that, so I pulled off and got some video of Hanson Bridge. That was pretty interesting. No kidding, man. That was my first look at a huge gorge like that up close and personal with the Snake River running through it. After Shoshone Falls, then I went to Balanced Rock Park. You go across these kind of badlands, it's kind of deserted. You go down in this valley, you cross a creek, come up on the other side, and lo and behold, there on the top right-hand side is this huge boulder, kind of teardrop shape or pear shape, upside down on this rock. That was quite interesting. Then I went northbound to Thousand Springs State Park. Well, it's called Thousand Springs, but I didn't count the springs there, but I don't think there was 1,000. After Thousand Springs State Park, it was time to get back to the business of doing a little driving up to Boise, Idaho, my destination for that day, and visit some old friends that I've known since the late 70s. My original thinking from Boise was to drive north right up to the center of Idaho, the same as I'd done in Colorado, but I noticed on my map that I had flagged a place in Washington that I had wanted to see. It's Palouse Falls, or Palusi Falls. So, okay, that meant a little detour. After my friends and I had attended Mass, we went out, had a nice Sunday lunch, and then I headed out to Walla Walla, Washington to spend the night before going to Palouse Falls. I left Walla Walla early in the morning, as is my norm when I'm traveling, and headed north to Palouse Falls. Now, this had been on my to-do list for some times, and it is absolutely mind-blowing. To get there, you turn off the highway and you got 3 miles of some of the roughest, yes, more gravel road going down to the falls, but when you get down there, it is well worth it. After Palouse Falls, then I headed on up. I crossed back into Idaho after going through Spokane, Washington. I had a really nice lunch at a little Mexican restaurant, El Paisa, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Then my friends in Boise had told me about this mission I really needed to go see, but they didn't tell me the significance of it. The significance is it is registered as the oldest building in the state of Idaho. It was built by the Coeur d'Alene Indian tribes along with the Jesuits many, many years ago. So then I motored on down the interstate. Yeah, I got to drive on interstate during this part, to the Kellogg, Idaho, and there's a Silver Mountain Resort gondola. So I wanted to ride the gondola, so I pulled off into Kellogg, Idaho, and I saw the gondola going overhead, and I started following it up through the mountains, miles and miles, up to gravel road, and finally, after about, 45 minutes or so, it dawns on me, this can't be where you get on the gondola. People are not going to drive up here. You must get on the gondola down and down. So turn around I go, and I found the gondola. It's at the Silver Mountain Ski Resort. Walked in there. Now we're closed for the day. We open at 9 in the morning. I said, well, shoot, I'll just have to do this another time. I'm not sticking around, just to ride the gondola. And then I got to think, wait a minute, you've been driving all day. Let's just settle down here. So I'm thinking resort. Oh man, this is going to cost me. I was shocked at the price they gave me. I said, yes, I almost stayed 2 or 3 nights at that price. Anyway, that's a wrap for this segment. This morning I left Kellogg, Idaho, and went just a few miles down the road to the Crystal Gold Mine and RV Park. And there I got a lesson on panning gold, and later I got to tour the mine. The mine goes, I think it's 200 feet back into the mountain, but when you're at the end of the mine, I think you said 900 feet
below the surface of the mountain. After the mine tour, drove on down the road to $50,000 in. Well, why would I stop at $50,000 in? Like Wall Drug, this company has their advertisements every few miles on the interstate. So after a while, you get to thinking, what is the $50,000 in? Found a restaurant there, had a good lunch, then snaked my way through the mountains of northern Montana to go to Libby.
I got to Libby, Montana and checked into a motel, then Googled where the nearest brew pub was. I found one just a few blocks away. I went to the brew pub. It's about 8:30 p.m. I'm sorry, sir, we're closed. I said, how can you be closed? We close at 8 o'clock. I said, you got to be kidding. The brew pub's going to close at 8 o'clock? Well, yes, sir. You know, we open at, I think they said noon tomorrow. And I said, well, I'm going to be gone by then. Well, that was weird. Later, I learned it's a Montana state law that they close at 8 o'clock for whatever reason. So anyway, the next morning I went to Kootenai Falls, suspended bridge. So I kind of double back from where I came from, went to Kootenai Falls. That turned out to be a very interesting hike to get there. From there, I went back to Libby, and then from Libby, I went to the Libby Dam Visitor Center and got a lot of great video there. What an awesome, awesome dam that is. It's huge. But they told me later that I need to go to Hungry Horse Dam. From Libby, then I made it on up through Eureka, and from Eureka, the next stop that I'd planned to do was at the First and Last Chance Bar. It sits right on the Canadian border. When you look at this bar, you know, from the parking lot, it's right in front of you. Turn to the left, and just, you know, a few hundred yards down the road, there's the guardhouse or entrance to going into Canada. I slept like a baby that night. From Eureka, Montana, I motored south on down to Whitefish. I have a friend I knew I was going to meet up with from San Antonio. He moved up there about a year ago. Actually, just came up for a visit and decided, hey, I'm staying up here. I love it. There's hunting and fishing everywhere. Then from Whitefish, went on down to Kalispell. I actually spent a few days in Kalispell with an old friend. She took me whitewater rafting on the Flathead River, and then also we spent an afternoon at Whitefish Lake. While staying in Kalispell, I noticed a longtime friend of mine on Facebook. It looked like she was following me up on this trip. And I thought, we just might meet up. Then I checked her Facebook one day, and lo and behold, if she and her family are not camping at Columbia Falls, just a few minutes from Kalispell. So anyway, make a long story short, we got together, and I got to meet my longtime Facebook friend that I'd never met. Now here's what's interesting. I know her husband, but the last time I saw him, he was a young teenager. Now, isn't that quirky or what? I got to meet her and their wonderful 5 very pleasant children. Teaser, 291 miles, and 2 days later, we meet again. On my 3rd attempt, I finally found Hungry Horse Dam. Took 3 tries, but I found it and got an awesome video of Hungry Horse Dam, and I was so happy that I did because it is huge too. The sun was just coming over the horizon when I left Kalispell heading south. I left so early because I had a full day to get down to West Yellowstone, Montana to lay my head down before entering the park tomorrow. The sun was barely over the horizon when I drove past for what seemed like an hour or so Flathead Lake. It's beautiful looking at the reflections of the sun in the water. My first stop was for breakfast at St. Ignatius, Montana. At the Old Timers Cafe, they serve up an awesome breakfast of biscuits and gravy. Then I went over to St. Ignatius Mission Parish and got some video and pictures of the parish. Man, that thing is old. Next stop was Helena, Montana. There, I just, for memory's sake, wanted to go by my old boss's house. Him and his wife have passed on now, but their house is still there, and I just wanted to see it because I spent several nights there. He was my boss in Helena, and I lived in Billings, way to the east of Helena. Next stop was Berkeley Pit in Butte, Montana. I don't think I'd ever been to Butte, Montana before, but it's an open pit mine. It's not operating anymore, but it was certainly interesting to see. From Butte, I went east on Interstate 90, and when I exited it to go south on US 287, I knew that there was not going to be gas stations for who knows when. So I decided to fill up the gas station there. Pulled in, put the credit card in the machine, put the nozzle in the tank, and started pumping. Just a few minutes, it clicked off. Looked around, everybody's pump had just shut down, froze up. I only got a couple of gallons. Oh, well, this is great. Okay, well, maybe that'll get me to the next gas station, wherever that may be. So I'm driving, heading south, looking for those mountains. I want to see those mountains. Finally, come to this little town called Norris. Pulled in there for gas. Guess what? Guess who's pulling out of the gas station? That Facebook friend I had never met until Columbia Falls and her family were just fixing to leave. We had a surprise meeting in the middle of nowhere, Montana. Now, is that a coincidence or what? Think if that pump had not failed back at the freeway, I would have just sailed right on past them with a full tank of gas, and we'd have never had this meeting. Some people call these coincidences. I call them God incidences, and only God knows why He blessed us to meet each other again. I'm excited now. I can't wait. I want to be in West Yellowstone now, but there's a few more miles to put under my car before I get there. Destination West Yellowstone. Well, West Yellowstone's a gateway community to Yellowstone National Park. I mean, it literally sits right on the border. You know, 4 million people a year visit West Yellowstone. It's just a small town. In fact, the census of 2010 had the population at 1,271. Imagine that 1,271 taking care of 4 million visitors a year. Man, they must be busy and good. Leaving West Yellowstone, heading east through the Yellowstone National Park, first stop was Terrace Spring. Now, this was right off the highway, and you're driving along and look off the left-hand side, and here's all this steam coming out of the ground. So I circled back, found the parking lot back in the forest, took a short walk down there, and I was absolutely amazed at the different pools of water that were bubbling up, forming steam coming out of the earth. Next was Gibbon Falls. Now, Gibbon Falls, what can I say? It's a huge waterfall right off the highway, and everybody wanted to see it, including me. Just down the road is Beryl Spring. Now, Beryl Spring, that is an amazing place. The smell of sulfur in the air from these bubbling springs, and just, if you listen close in the video, you can hear the steam coming out of the ground. Next was Artist Paint Pots. Now, this was a good hike off the road and down through the forest, and a lot of dead forest. I don't know the reason for that, but the Artist Paint Pots is definitely something to see. There's different colors of paint pots down there. Continuing eastbound to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. I've seen the Grand Canyon before, but never the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and this did not disappoint at all. There's multiple waterfalls there. It is phenomenal. And I think it said, unlike other canyons, this was not carved by glacier. This was strictly carved out of the rock by water over eons of time. After filming at the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, the first stop was Firehole Falls. It's a neat road that snakes along the river there, and got to see some waterfalls. Then back up on the road down to Fountain Paint Pots, where there's some bubbling action, sulfur-laden smoke coming up from the earth. And then lastly, Old Faithful. Got to see the geyser blow. That was so cool. Then, leaving Yellowstone National Park, going south toward the Tetons that I wanted to see next, made it to Jackson Hole, Wyoming in time to get a beer, and found out that there's no room in the inn in Jackson, Wyoming. The reason I included Jackson, Wyoming on this great Northwest adventure was I wanted to see the sunrise on the Teton Mountains, especially the Grand Teton. So after having a good night's sleep in my car, I got up early in the morning. No use sleeping in your car. and went to Schwabacher Landing and joined a lot of other folks there waiting for the sun to come up over the horizon. Now, this is going to be a long day, and I've got, what is almost over 7 hours and 400 miles to cover to end up in Newcastle, Wyoming, which, like West Yellowstone, is right outside the park. Newcastle, Wyoming is right outside of Custer National Forest, where Crazy Horse Monument is, and Mount Rushmore, and a lot of other fun stuff I'm going to do.
From Newcastle, Wyoming, South Dakota border is only about 12 minutes away, then another 28 minutes down the road and you arrive at Custer, South Dakota. I had a well-needed breakfast at the Dakota Cowboy Restaurant and then headed north up to Crazy Horse Memorial. Mount Rushmore is only about a 30-minute drive from Crazy Horse Memorial. The last time I saw Crazy Horse Memorial and Mount Rushmore was in 2004 when I rode my Sportster up from San Antonio.
And you know what? They haven't changed one bit. The next morning I left Newcastle and headed up to Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower, also known as Mantotipila, which means Black Bear in the Lakota language. It's a volcanic rock that rises 1,200 feet from the Black Hills. It was the very first national monument in the United States, bestowed that designation by President Teddy Roosevelt on September the 24th, 1906.
See that Devil's Tower ain't that big? That rooster's pecking on it.
After a big lunch at Devil's Tower Gulch restaurant, I headed over to Spearfish Canyon, and I had a lot of people tell me that, man, that is a beautiful motorcycle ride. And looking at it on the map, it was a squiggly, swervy road. Went through Spearfish Canyon. I loved it because it was a road between two steep mountains right following the river. One of the places I stopped and looked at was Bridal Veil Falls.
Ah, nice. Very nice. Bridal Veil Falls. Spearfish Canyon.
Another friend recommended going to the Cheyenne Crossing, and that's at the end of Spearfish Canyon. There's a cafe, gift shop, and gathering place. I read that Cheyenne Crossing has been a landmark since 1878 when the Deadwood Cheyenne stagecoach stopped here on its regular route to and from Cheyenne, Wyoming and Deadwood, South Dakota until 1885. Also recommended at Cheyenne Crossing is the home of the legendary Indian tacos. Well, I just got to keep wondering what an Indian taco is, because I was still stuffed from lunch back up at Devil's Tower. I motored through Lead, South Dakota, and found a place to lay my head for the night in Deadwood, South Dakota.
In Lead, South Dakota, I started the day off at Sanford Lab Home State Visitor Center. Now, this used to be the Home State Mine. It was an open pit mine, but actually 8,500 feet it went down into the earth. Took a little city tour there and visited the Hoist House. In Keystone, South Dakota, I rode a chairlift tramway skyride up to the top of this mountain and then took what they call the Alpine Slide down. Man, that was fun. It's like a luge without ice or snow. Thing moves. Took the freeway over to Wall Drug and exited and headed south toward the Badlands. Got some video and film of the Badlands, circled it, went through an Indian reservation and 3 checkpoints down there. It was on that reservation I almost ran out of gas. In fact, when I pulled into the gas station, I had 2 miles of fuel left. When I entered Custer State Park, I got caught in a buffalo herd. They weren't stampeding, they were just passing through. Scared the bejeepers out of me. Continued motoring across South Dakota into Wyoming, where I spent the night in Lusk, Wyoming. From Lusk, Wyoming, I continued to head south toward Colorado, the destination being to go to Leadville, Colorado. Leadville, the highest town in the United States of America. It's an old mining town from way back when. What I'm doing there is looking up my old buddy from electronics school back in the early 70s and see if I can touch base with him. It's been, let's see, last time I saw him was in 2004 when I came through here on my Sportster. So I hope I'm able to connect with him in Salida. Snaking my way south through the Rocky Mountains, I passed Dillon Reservoir. It's a beautiful body of water with the mountains reflecting in it. And I also passed Climax Molybdenum Mine Company. Fascinating to look at their museum, their kind of display of equipment across the highway from the mine. From there, I plan to do Independence Pass in Mount Evans Road and then go on south and do Pikes Peak. Same thing, last time I'd done those. Well, I've never done Mount Evans Road. It's the highest road in the United States, but Independence Pass and Pikes Peak, last time I did those was in 2004 also. I got up early and left before anybody else was up in the hostel. But speaking of hostel, that's the first time in my life I ever stayed in a hostel. I always thought hostels were for, young people. And sure enough, 90% of the people there could be my children in age, and they treated me very well, very welcoming, very open, very conversational, very pleasant people indeed. Anyway, back to the story. Left Leadville, did some video at Independence Pass. Then I turned around and headed back to Leadville and continued going northbound up to I-70. And then once I'm on I-70, heading over toward Idaho Springs, where I'll exit to go to Mount Evans, I've got to go through Eisenhower Tunnel. And I got a video of that too, you bet your booty. You exit I-70 at Idaho Springs and follow the signs to Mount Evans Road. At that point, you're going to come to a park entrance. Now, what I understand is this area is somewhat controlled by the city of Denver, and you're supposed to have a permit and blah, blah, blah. And so I got to the park entrance. They asked me if I had a permit. I said, well, no, I'm just passing through and wanted to see this road. And says, you're not stopping? I said, well, I'm going to stop at the top and take pictures. He said, well, okay, go ahead, but just don't stop at any of our sites. They have some developed sites there that they want you to pay to get a permit to stop at. I didn't need to. Once you check in, you immediately head up through the forest and you climb and climb and climb and climb, and then eventually you come out of the forest, you're above timberline. The road is very narrow, just barely two cars can get by on it. There's no shoulder, no guardrails. It's quite hairiest, the hairiest road I ever drove on, but I made it. I may have said it before, but I really don't like driving on freeways. They're too sterile. I like to take the back roads, even if it takes longer to get there, because you get to see more of the countryside, and this serpentine route down to Manitou Springs is an example of that, but I didn't have to drive on a freeway. It's over 3 hours and 161 miles, but it was a beautiful drive in that afternoon. Tomorrow, Pikes Peak. I hit the road early to go up to Pikes Peak. And I'll tell you about Pikes Peak. If you look there, it's just as twisty and curvy as Mount Evans Road, but the difference is it's got guardrails on it and center lines. And there's room enough for everybody on the road. It's an hour up. Spent about an hour up there looking around, taking videos. Spent another hour coming down, so now we've got 3 hours. And while I was up there, I saw a cog railroad and found out that leads out of Manitou Springs, so I went down to the cog railroad and rode it up. That's another hour up, and I thought, well, when I get to the top here, I've already seen it. I'll just catch the next one coming down. Oh, but no, wait a minute. The one you ride up on waits for you an hour and then comes back down. So the time I got back to Manitou Springs, I had invested 6 hours of this day on Pikes Peak. So the only thing to do then would just hightail it on down to Canyon City, where tomorrow I will visit the Royal Gorge and see what else is waiting for me in good old Canyon City. I was hot and dusty when I arrived at Canyon City, checked into the motel and found me a brew pub, Florence Brewing Company. They had some good beers on tap. I made a little video about it and They really appreciated it. I put it on their Facebook page. Then the next morning, went to Skyline Drive. Now, Skyline Drive, oh my goodness, it's another thing without guardrails and hardly no shoulder at all. But I went on Skyline Drive, and then after that, I went to the Royal Gorge Bridge and rode the gondola there, and that is so cool. And I looked down by the Snake River in the gorge below. I go, what's that railroad track? Well, after I went there, I found out that there's a railroad that goes up there, so I went back to Canyon City and got on the train and rode the train through the gorge. That is a beautiful ride. Really, if you go to the Royal Gorge, you gotta take the train. I've been doing this Great Northwest Adventure for 30 days now, and I've come to the point I'm going back to Texas, y'all. So I got to hammer down. I had lunch at the DQ and Chili restaurant in Oklahoma, just north of Amarillo. I came up on a micro downburst. This is a torrential rain, and I caught some good lightning strikes and put them together in a video. The next stop was Cadillac Ranch. I had gone through the micro downburst, and now it's starting to sprinkle here, so it's catching up with us, and it's fixing to just come a Noation flood. But I did get a few pictures and a little intro video at the Cadillac Ranch.
Here, it's just sprinkling just a little bit.
It's been an awesome 6,762-mile Great Northwest adventure, and I loved most every minute of it. Of course there's challenges. There's always going to be challenges when you're traveling, but that's just part of the fun. Overcoming, keep moving forward.